So we've all heard the phrase beyond a reasonable doubt in movies and in TV, but what does it really mean in a courtroom and in real life? Now, this is the standard used in criminal trials. Civil trials over money or family law issues, totally different burden of proof. We can talk about that in another video. But in criminal trials, criminal cases, the standard is beyond and to the exclusion of every reasonable doubt. Now, that does not mean 100% certainty, okay? But it's very high. Okay, it's very high. It's one of the highest burdens in the entire United States criminal justice or legal system outright. Forget about just the criminal justice system. Okay, I like to put numbers on things because I think numbers give you folks a good context. So if I had to put numbers on it, it's about 90 to 95% guilt, not beyond all possible or imaginary doubt, right? But beyond all reasonable doubts. So let's give some examples. So right now I'm filming this video in the Rossen law firm studio. Now, if I told you that I came into the studio by helicoptering on top of our building and then, parachuting down into the building, pulling my best, whether it's James Bond or Mission Impossible style, sliding through the air vents to hop right down here and talk and do this video to you, well, is it possible? Well, anything's possible, right? But is that reasonable? Absolutely not. Versus if I tell you, well, hey, I walked in the front door to my office, walked through the office, came into the front door of the studio, and I'm here right now. Well, okay, that's reasonable. And that's an example of just, some of the differences between reasonable and, possible or imaginary or speculative. Now, there's three ways that a jury can find reasonable doubt. And if they find reasonable doubt, then therefore the client, the defendant, our client, would be found not guilty. So the first way is from the evidence. So let's say this is a murder case. And in this murder case, you have a video that's very grainy. It kind of has that snowy, grainy look to it. And they're saying the video shows everything. And the jury looks at this video and they go, this video doesn't show anything of use. There's no way, right? That would be an example of from the evidence itself, okay? There's reasonable doubt. Now, there's a second way to find reasonable doubt, and that's from a lack of evidence. So, for example, let's say the police, were supposed to have their body cameras on, and for some reason they forgot to turn it on. Well, now there's a lack of evidence as far as what really happened in that case on that day during that situation. And the jury could very well find that there is reasonable doubt because of a lack of evidence from the police officers. The third way is from a conflict in the evidence. Let's talk about that same murder case, and let's say that it was a self-defense claim was raised. And there's two different witnesses, and witness one says that the defendant was attacked first and defended himself, and witness two says, no, the defendant was the aggressor and he's the one that attacked first and killed the person. Well, you have witness A saying one thing, you have witness B saying something completely different. And that's an example where there's a conflict in the evidence between those two. Okay, so those are three different ways that a jury can find reasonable doubt and find our client not guilty. So now that we've said what reasonable doubt is and how to find reasonable doubt, well, whose job is it to prove that the defendant is proven guilty beyond and to the exclusion of every reasonable doubt? Well, it's the state or the government's burden. It's the state of Florida. It's the federal government. It's the prosecutor's job. And if they don't prove it, the client has to be not guilty. And so how do they prove it? Well, they prove it through their witnesses, through police officers, through civilians, through physical evidence, maybe DNA, photographs, right? Different things like that. But it is exclusively their job to prove that our clients are guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, why does this exist? Well, it exists to protect people. And our forefathers, way back when in the 1700s, said that it was better for 10 guilty people to go free than for one innocent person to be convicted, right? Because in all the different types of law that we have in our country, criminal, civil, family, right, suing over money or fighting over all these things, well, the absolute most important thing is somebody's freedom. Your liberty is at stake. And that's why we in our criminal justice system have this highest burden beyond and to the exclusion of every reasonable doubt. So let's recap. beyond and to the exclusion of every reasonable doubt is one of the absolute highest standards in our judicial system in the United States. Okay, it's unique to criminal cases. And in other videos, I'll discuss other burdens of proof, and we'll do a deep dive on probable cause, reasonable suspicion, all these different things so you folks can really be educated, okay? If you found this valuable, like it, subscribe to our channel, give us some comments. We want to know how you feel and what you're thinking about.